It all started 5 years ago. Back then, life was simple. My grandfather had just passed away and left me a large piece of rural land on the outskirts of a town that was slowly growing. I didn't think much of it at the time. It was mostly trees, fields, and a few dirt roads. But to me, it was more than land. It was family history. My grandfather had worked that soil with his own hands, and now it was mine to take care of. I did everything by the book. Filed all the paperwork, paid the property taxes, made sure the title was clean and clear in my name. It was quiet land, nothing but open skies, the sound of crickets at night, and the occasional pickup truck driving by. But a few months later, I noticed something strange that I was driving out to check the fencing line when I saw dust rising far in the distance. Heavy machinery, bulldozers, trucks, moving on what looked like my property. I thought maybe the county was repairing the old road. But as I got closer, I saw something that made my jaw drop. They weren't fixing anything. They were building houses, brand new foundations, concrete trucks, construction crews. The whole scene looked like a brand new housing development that I parked my truck and walked up to the site office. A trailer with a big glossy sign outside. Welcome to Oak Ridge Estates. Luxury living starts here. I was confused. Oak Ridge Estates? I'd never heard of that before. I asked one of the workers who was leveling the dirt nearby. Hey, who's in charge here? He pointed toward the trailer. Talk to the site manager. He handles all that. So I went in. Inside sat a man in his 40s, wearing sunglasses, polo shirt, and a smug grin. I explained who I was, told him I owned the surrounding land, and asked what this project was. He didn't even look worried. Oh yeah, we got all the permits. Everything's good here, he said casually, barely glancing up from his laptop. Really? I asked. Because from what I can see, you're building past the zoning line, onto my property. He actually laughed. Buddy, our engineers and lawyers checked everything. Trust me, you're mistaken. Something about his attitude didn't sit right with me, so I went home, pulled out my land deeds and old plat maps, those hand-drawn survey maps that show exact property lines, and started comparing. And that's when I realized something incredible. The HOA's builder had misread the old maps. The line they thought marked the end of their property was actually an outdated easement that in reality, almost 1/3 of their entire development, 98 newly built homes, were standing right on land that legally still belonged to me. At first, I thought, no way. This can't be real. But the more I compared, the clearer it became. Their boundary markers were wrong. Their survey was off. And all those new driveways, backyards, and even their fancy community park were sitting inside my legally owned land that I couldn't believe it. These people had just built an entire neighborhood on someone else's property. The next morning, I went straight to the county records office to double check. The clerk pulled up the official plat, the one filed with the state. When she turned the screen toward me, my heart skipped. The highlighted area, all those 98 homes, was shaded right inside my lot. Number. She looked up at me and said, "That's strange. Looks like they used an older map version for their permits. You're the rightful owner of that section." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a small mistake. This was massive, a multi-million-dollar housing project sitting on private land, my land. Now, I could have gone straight to court, but I decided to wait. I wanted to see just how deep this mistake ran and how long it would take before the HOA or the developer realized what they'd done. Weeks passed, then months. The houses kept going up. The roads were paved. Fences, driveways, mailboxes, everything finished. People even started moving in. Families unpacked boxes. Kids played on sidewalks. Neighbors waved from their porches, totally unaware that they were living on someone else's property. And not one person contacted me. Not the builder. Not the HOA board. Nobody. For a while, I just watched quietly that I drive by every week, just observing. I took pictures, videos, and even got updated satellite images for proof. I knew one day this was all going to matter. Then one afternoon, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA itself. At first, I thought maybe they'd finally figure it out. But when I opened it, my blood boiled. IT wasn't an apology. IT was a warning notice. Apparently, I was being reminded to trim the weeds and maintain my property because it was adjacent to their beautiful community and lowering aesthetic value. They were literally threatening me for not maintaining land that they had stolen. That's when I realized it was time to take action. But I didn't go straight for lawyers. I had something better in mind, at a plan that would make every single member of that HOA realize exactly whose land they were standing on. And when I finally executed that plan, the fallout was glorious. Instead of rushing to sue, I decided to play it smart. I quietly hired a property attorney, a sharp old man named Greg. Howard, who'd been doing real estate law for over 30 years, and a licensed surveyor to confirm every single inch of boundary line, though we spent weeks walking the property, measuring from the original steel stakes that had been buried decades ago, comparing them to satellite coordinates. Greg looked over the plats, deeds, easements, everything. And when all the evidence was laid out on the table, he leaned back in his chair, gave a small grin, and said, "Son, you're sitting on a gold mine. They built an entire community on your land." It was official. The survey proved beyond any doubt that the HOA had overstepped, not by a few feet, but by acres. Still, Greg advised patience. "If you make noise too early, they'll scramble and cover their tracks," he said. "Let them finish first. Let them invest everything, because once people start moving in, that's when it becomes real leverage." So that's exactly what we did. We waited. Month after month, construction continued. The roads got paved, the lights came on, and the realtor started putting up sold signs to BY summer. All 98 homes were sold. Families moved in with their furniture, kids, and pets. They planted flowers, built backyard decks, and proudly joined their shiny new HOA community. They had no clue they were living on land that legally wasn't theirs. And that's when I made my move. That we filed a formal land claim with the county recorder's office, attaching the verified surveys, title records, and ownership documentation. Within 48 hours, it was official. Every property deed connected to that development now had a red flag in the county system. Land ownership dispute. By the next morning, the HOA board's phones were ringing off the hook. Homeowners were panicking. Some couldn't finalize their mortgages because the title companies suddenly froze their paperwork. Others discovered their homes were technically built on someone else's private property. And that someone was me. The HOA board tried to downplay it, calling it a paperwork mix-up. But the legal documents didn't lie. Their developer had built an entire neighborhood outside their legal zone, right on my land. That afternoon, Greg sent out certified letters to the HOA, their builder, and every major homeowner's insurance company involved. The letters demanded full compensation for trespass, unlawful construction, and unauthorized use of private property. That's when the panic turned to chaos. The HOA president, a woman named Sandra Holt, called my lawyer directly, furious. She accused me of trying to extort them, said I was taking advantage of a technicality. Greg calmly replied, "Ma'am, this isn't a technicality. You built nearly 100 homes on land you don't own. That's not a mistake. That's theft with paperwork." She went silent. Within a week, emergency HOA meetings were being held almost daily. Residents were scared. Some threatened to sue the builder. Others demanded the HOA fix it immediately. Meanwhile, their builder's office went quiet. They stopped answering calls and emails. Clearly, they knew they'd messed up. That I just sat back and watched. For years, that land had been ignored. Now suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to me. The HOA's lawyer sent an offer, a pathetic one, trying to buy the land back at market value. But here's the thing. That land's value had skyrocketed because of their own development. What was once empty acreage was now full of roads, utilities, and houses, and according to my lawyer, I legally owned it all, including the improvements made upon it. Greg smiled and said, "They built you a neighborhood for free." Of course, I wasn't cruel. I didn't want families kicked out. But I also wasn't about to let a multi-million-dollar HOA get away with stealing my inheritance. When word got out, local media started sniffing around. Reporters showed up asking questions. Headlines started popping up. Homeowners shocked after learning HOA built on private land. 98 families in legal limbo over developer mistake. And that's when things really exploded. The HOA tried to silence it, even threatened to pursue defamation if I kept talking to the press. But the facts were public record now. Anyone could pull up the county map and see the boundaries for themselves. Behind the scenes, I was still calm, but Greg was preparing the next step. He drafted a massive compensation demand. Either they buy the land at developed value, meaning every square foot at full residential price, or we start the process of eviction and repossession. They had 30 days to respond. By week 2, I started seeing results. Real estate signs disappeared overnight. Homeowners were trying to sell, but couldn't. Banks started freezing mortgage transfers. And the HOA's main entrance construction completely halted. They'd built their dream neighborhood right into a legal nightmare. But here's the best part. Not a single person had yet realized what I was really planning to do next. I wasn't after just money. That I wanted something far better. Something that would make every HOA member understand exactly whose land they've been standing on all along. And when I finally pulled the trigger on that plan, it changed everything. When the county put the red flag on their deeds, the whole project froze. Faster than anyone expected. Within days, the bank pulled financing. The loan officers called it an unresolvable title risk. The developer, who a month earlier had swaggered around in his hard hat like he owned the world, suddenly had no answers. His phones went unanswered. Subcontractors stopped showing up. The model homes were padlocked. Streetlights still flickered at dusk, but the hum of construction trucks was gone. The HOA board scrambled. They held emergency meetings in a church basement, then in the rec room, whispering like people who'd built a house of cards and watched the wind move in. Homeowners filled the chairs with flushed faces, furious, frightened, embarrassed. They wanted someone to fix this now. They wanted refunds, explanations, and stability. That I could have taken a nuclear option. With clear title and a mountain of legal paperwork behind me, I could have walked into court and demanded every conceivable remedy. Possession, removal of improvements, damages, the whole box and dice. I could have forced evictions, ordered houses torn down, and made headlines for months. It would have been a scorched earth victory. And yes, some nights I toyed with the thought of making the kind of example. But my lawyer, Greg, had a better plan. He reminded me of something important. I didn't want to hurt the families who'd innocently bought these homes. I wanted the injustice righted, the people responsible to be accountable, and for the HOA to never forget who they'd wronged. So we negotiated, quietly, strategically, ruthlessly. The developer begged for time. The HOA pleaded for leniency. The residents pleaded for certainty. We listened. Then we made our demands clear. Full market value for the land is developed, plus damages for trespass, legal fees, and compensation for the stress and chaos they'd caused. Not charity, not a token apology. Real restitution, the kind that rebalanced what had been taken. They tried lowball offers at first. They sent spreadsheets full of numbers designed to make my jaw drop in disbelief. Greg shredded those offers with terse, professional letters. We countered, and again, each offer improved. Each concession pulled them closer to reality. They doubled down, built infrastructure, and turned raw acreage into a neighborhood, and that had real, measurable value. Finally, the day came when their board signed the agreement. The settlement wasn't a single headline-grabbing number in a paper. It was a stack of contracts that, when added together, meant I could retire if I wanted to. Market value for the land, damages, interest, legal fees paid. The developer agreed to cover title insurance for every homeowner so their mortgages could clear. The builder agreed to set aside a fund to repair any minor issues caused by the title transfer. The HOA agreed to something else. And that something else is the part one loved most. When a new entrance was restored and the landscaping crews came back over, a small plaque was mounted at the main gate. It reads, plainly and forever visible to every resident and visitor, built on former private land, corrected 2024. That plaque is a history lesson and a quiet public shaming all in one. Every time I drive past, my foot eases off the gas and I let myself smile. I smile not because I made a fortune, though I did, but because the people who assumed they could move a line on a map without consequence learned otherwise. They thought they were expanding a neighborhood. Instead, they had built a legal trap of their own making. Life after the settlement changed in small, satisfying ways. The banks unthawed the mortgages. Homes that had stalled for weeks finally closed. Many residents stayed. They'd already planted roots, literal and figurative, and the title insurance gave them peace. Some sellers cashed out quickly. Others quietly moved on. The neighborhood regained its calm, but it never again had the arrogant glow it once did. The HOA held itself to stricter standards. Their meetings were more transparent. Their attorneys were more careful about plat maps, that I used the money wisely, that a comfortable retirement came early, but I didn't vanish. I fixed the fences on the remaining parcel, planted a grove of trees where the old boundary stones used to be, and set aside a small scholarship for local kids, a quiet thanks to the town that had watched all this unfold. I like to think my grandfather would have laughed at the irony. The land he worked became the very thing that allowed me some peace in my own life. And still, the plaque does the rest. Children on bikes ride by, and sometimes point, asking their parents what it means. Parents explain in whispers about ownership, history, and doing things the right way. Newbies moving into the neighborhood later discover the story and pause, a little embarrassed, a little relieved. For me, that plaque is proof that paperwork matters, that attention matters, and that there's always value in being patient and doing things by the book. That I never wanted spectacle. I wanted justice. And in the end, justice came with irony, restitution, and a small public reminder at the gate. They thought they were expanding a neighborhood, but in truth, they just built on my legal trap. So now, when evening comes and the streetlights in that neighborhood click on, I sometimes drive slowly by, watch the lamplight wash over the front porches, and feel the quiet satisfaction of someone who let the earth and the law do the work. The houses are still there. The kids still play. The town still grows. But every time I pass that plaque, I remember the lesson learned. Property lines are not suggestions.